Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm recommending some more fantasy books from a particular subgenre. Today I'm talking about urban fantasy. When I mean urban fantasy, I'm talking about fantasy that is usually set within the modern world, the 21st century, and this is where magic has filtered in and there's some supernatural and possibly some non-human kind of creatures running around in the shadows. So on the assumption that the world operates normally as it is, but there's a layer of things going on that most people don't know about it, and is in these kind of shadowy corners or the corners of the internet where there's rumours that people claim things that say, oh, this sounds like conspiracy theories, and they're kind of pushed off as that. So it's never completely out in the open in most cases with urban fantasy. And those are the kind of books that I'm talking about. I'm not focusing on some of the more kind of romantic ones that have lots of those monsters. I'm picking a few. And because there's such a massive selection, I can't go through all of them. So I'm going to read out some titles and some authors of books you should check out, but I'm going to focus on just a few of them. So there are some urban fantasy authors you should definitely check out. I'm going to rattle through now. The likes of Benedict Jacka has done quite a long-running urban fantasy series that has wrapped up. A friend of mine, Steve McHugh, has done the Harlequin Chronicles and the Avalon Chronicles. They're fantastic. You should check them out too. There's quite a few of those books. That'll keep you busy for a while. There's other people like Kate Griffin, who's a pen name for Catherine Webb and also Claire North. She did an urban fantasy series set in London that's kind of unlike anything I've ever seen, because she really integrates technology and facets of society to create monsters in a way that I've not seen other people do. She'll get something that lives within the electricity within a city that has an entity and a spirit. So it's not like, oh, there's a troll under a bridge, there's a, whatever it might be. There are things, but they're very much to do with creations within our society of our civilization that we've created today, whereas other urban fantasy series will have, vampires, wells and so running around within the city. She has elements of that, but all of her creatures are a bit different, and it's quite hard to describe, but it's a really interesting story, really interesting series, and very, very different, so you should check out that as well. The first one I will talk about is, it starts with The Rivers of London, and this is by Ben Aaronovitch. Now the short pitch is, what if, a boy wizard grew up and joined the police force? And that is in essence what it's about. It's set in London, and London police force is called the Metropolitan Police, or the Met for short. And this is about a young black guy who joins the police force, and he's okay, he's not the best, he's not the worst, he's fairly intelligent, but there's something a little bit different about him, and he gets given this kind of awful assignment to go and almost babysit this other senior officer, and he doesn't know why he's there. And then you find out that this other officer, Nightingale, is in fact a wizard, and he's the only wizard in the Met. And everyone thinks there again that he's just not all there, that it's not real. There's no such thing as magic, there's no such thing as demons or vampires or whatever it might be. They all just think he's a bit of an oddball. Anything that's a little kind of X-Filesy gets pushed off to him. And suddenly this new guy is working with Nightingale, and he's like, well, why am I here? And it's not a spoiler to say that you realise he actually has some magic in him too, this young police officer. There's something special about him. And it's about him moving forward in the world of London, where suddenly the blinkers are taken off and everything starts to become very, very different. It's not what he expected. He meets some interesting characters. He meets the spirits of parts of London that are created in people form. And this series goes back quite a way now. I think it's over 10 years old now. And there are a lot of books in this series, and they're all a standalone adventure, as it were, with the main characters, and then it ends and then there's another one, and so on. You should probably read them in order. If you're going to do it that way, you can't really just chop and change and jump around, because there are threads that pull through. But it's a really fascinating series, and it's really worth your time. The next author I want to talk about and his series is Mike Carey, who's done the Felix Castor urban fantasy novels. Now Mike Carey has done lots of different novels in different genres. He did The Girl with All the Gifts, which was a twist on a zombie story, which was then made into a movie, so you can go and check that out. But his Felix Castor novels were similar to a comic that he wrote back in the day, and a character you may have heard of, Constantine, or John Constantine, Mike has worked in comics also for decades. He wrote for DC, he wrote for Vertigo, which was the kind of adult, more serious offshoot where the likes of Neil Gaiman wrote novels when he was doing Sandman. That was a Vertigo book. And I believe back in the day, Mike Carey originally pitched these ideas as Constantine stories, and DC weren't kind of up for them. They weren't really sure. So he started creating his own urban fantasy series as novels with this character, Felix Castor. They're all set in the UK, and this is probably closer to urban fantasy that you're more familiar with. There are demons, there are zombies, but there again, Mike's done something really unique. He sort of said, you know, what is a zombie? What is a spirit? And he's taken a little bit of a twist on it. It's not what you think it is. There's something a little bit different. And the main character, Castor, does use magic, and he does use demon traps, but he also uses music as part of his magic, which is something that I don't think I've really seen in an urban fantasy series before. They're very, very dark. They're very, very serious. They're very full of adult content. So if you want something light and fluffy and romantic, this isn't for you. This is something much, much darker. There is humour in there, but it is very much in keeping with the setting, which is, you know, gloomy and oppressive sometimes, but they're exciting, they're thrilling. Characterization is fantastic, and Mike Carey is just a fantastic writer anyway. There are 5 novels only. That is it. Although very, very recently, Subterranean Press has released a new novella. Now, obviously, I can't afford the Subterranean Press edition, and they went on sale and they were gone in like 5 minutes. So I'm hoping that will be reprinted in another collection or something later on. But the 5 Felix Castor novels are out there. Hunt them down. They're definitely worth a read. And now we come to one of the biggest urban fantasy series around. It's been running for 20 years now, and one of my favourite series, and this is The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. And this is the story of Harry Dresden. He's the only wizard in the phone book in Chicago. And the stories start very, very small. They start with the fact Harry is in office and someone comes in with a problem, and when he looks into it, he realises there's something a little bit odd. Most often he gets people coming in, and when he looks into it, it's very, very mundane. It's not what they want. He has things on his door that says, you know, I don't do love spells, I don't do this, I don't do that. And he's a private investigator. He does follow people and gather information, but he's not there to see if a husband is cheating on his wife or whatever like that. And gradually, as the stories go on, they get bigger and bigger, and the world begins to reveal more of what's happening. So there are vampires, and there are werewolves, and there are zombies, and there are other wizards out there. But the first few books are very standalone, just Harry solving a problem, helping someone out in need. But as they go on, they build, and the story builds, and we find out more about his background, his family, his friends. He gets more allies, and there's another type of fantasy that's sort of like leveling up, progression fantasy, where a character is almost like playing a computer game. They level up with every book and get more and more powerful. And this isn't that, but in some ways, the more that Harry does, the better he gets at magic, the more deeply involved he gets with other people. He starts associating with more powerful beings. He gets better at day-to-day magic. He learns more. So he is constantly evolving. So it's not progression fantasy, but it is in some ways. And I hadn't heard that phrase until only a few years ago. And by then, I was like 10 or 12 books in to the series. And in some ways, I prefer the characters to keep evolving. I mean, you read like some novels and long-running series, and they're very episodic. It's like the old 22 episode TV series. One episode's great, it gets to the end, it finishes, and then the next one, it's another one. And the characters haven't really changed or evolved. And the Dresden Files, Harry has, but so has everybody else around him. He has highs and lows. His world changes, it gets blown apart. Things get better for a time and then they get worse. But throughout the course of the series, he's getting better at magic. He's getting stronger. He's helping more people. He's getting involved in bigger issues that have a wider impact. And it's just fantastic. It's really, really brilliant world building. It's told in the first person, so you spend a lot of time with Harry. He has done some short stories that come from other people's perspectives, so you get to see other corners of the world that you wouldn't see, that we normally get with Harry. But also the most interesting thing is, you get to see how other people perceive Harry. He has this vision of himself, as we all do. We look in the mirror and we see a certain thing. but we don't really get to see how other people see us. And it's really interesting to see that he's not what people think he is. The way he sees himself, he's a geek, he's a gamer, but he's also a wizard. And they see this very, very tall, powerful, quite strong force of nature, but he doesn't see himself in that way at all. So really interesting short stories. Now there's something like, I think there's 17 Dresden Files novels, and there's going to be 23. And basically Jim Butcher is writing one book, then he's doing something else in another series, a refresher, having a break. But if you start now and you come all the way up to the present, by the time you get to up to the current book, the new one will be out, which I think is going to be 2024 or 2025. We're not sure yet. But the books, have a gap sometimes. And a year in the book is a year of time as well. So that's another reason that Harry's progressing and growing as a character. The other thing I like about the series is the characters that surround Harry. Some of them start off as very ordinary people, and some of them don't have powers. They're not werewolves or vampires or have abilities, but they get dragged into this world because they genuinely want to help people. Whether it's someone who's a cop, and there again, there's that kind of Mulder and Scully thing where people start calling them Mulder because they've bought into it. They've seen enough, have spent enough time with Harry that they believe the things that he tells them. Whereas other people still just don't. They just don't understand. And there's another guy, it's a very minor spoiler, who's a coroner. And he sees all sorts of weird things. And gradually he begins to realise, I can do more than just being a coroner. I can actually help people outside of that, now that I understand this other world. And there again, he's an heroic character, but he's just this ordinary weedy little guy. He's not really, really strong, but he is smart and he is funny and he is determined and he's a genuine need to help people. And it's the characters, I think. I love the adventures, I love the excitement, I love the battles, but I think my favourite thing in this series is the characters and seeing them change and grow over time and who they could become if given the opportunity. Really love the series. Highly recommended from me. My final one is probably something you've never heard of before. You probably have heard of the author, if you're a fantasy fan, but you probably never heard of this series. Now, the author is Terry Brooks, and he wrote an urban fantasy trilogy back in the day that I also need to go back and reread, but it's absolutely fantastic. Now, it starts with Running with the Demon. And I'm going to read the back because it sets it up and then I can kind of talk about it a little bit. On the hottest 4th of July weekend in decades, two men have come to Hopewell, Illinois. One is a demon, a dark servant of the void with a terrible secret. The other is John Ross, a knight of the word who, while he sleeps, lives in the hell of the world of what it will become if he fails to change the course whilst he is awake. At stake is the soul of a 14-year-old girl mysteriously linked to both men, and the lives of the people of Hopewell. As it suggests, John Ross, a knight of the world. He's a knight of God, really, but he's not what you think. He doesn't walk around in armour. He doesn't have these and thous and all the rest of it. He's an ordinary man who realises what he is, and he's given this power. And when he uses the power that he has in the present, it means there's another time he cannot use that power. And when he sleeps, he dreams of the future if he doesn't act in the present. So every time he uses his power in the present, when he's dreaming of it, he's being actively chased by the monsters and the terrors and the demons that are running around there. And he has to live that future. It's not a passive thing. In the dream, it's active. They're chasing him and he's controlling his body in the future of what it will become. And if he uses his power then, he can't use it in the present. So it's not one of these things where you can just keep doing it and using his powers. So there's a limit on the amount of magic that he has. And this demon there again, it's not what you think. He looks like a man. He doesn't have horns and he doesn't have weird supernatural legions. And there are no zombies and werewolves. So it's a very much a human story. It's very much about people, family, values. And it's about these two men who come to this town and this young woman. It's about her soul and the balance and why she's important. Who is she? What does the demon want from her? And John doesn't know. He just knows that he's been guided to this place and then he finds this girl as well. And the demon is there, but he works in the shadows. He manipulates other people. He pushes their buttons so that they will go after the girl and John because he knows he's there. So there's this great kind of cat and mouse game between the two of them. But it's all happening around the edges. It's never in plain sight. You don't see them running down the street throwing fireballs at each other and battling one another like that. It's not about that at all. It's a very human story, and it's really, really good. And I don't know why more people aren't talking about it. Maybe because it's quite an old series. If I look at when this was first published, it is quite a while ago now. 1997 it was first published by Orbit in the UK. Everybody knows his Shannara books. So when this came out, it probably feels a bit like the Stephen King and the Dark Tower thing. Whenever I've seen a couple of interviews with Stephen King where he says, whenever he goes to a book signing or an event, he'll say to someone, who's read, The Shining or The Stand? And loads of people put their hand up. And they'll say, right, who's read The Dark Tower? And like one or two hands will go up in the audience. Maybe this is the way with Terry Brooks. A lot of people, say, oh, yeah, I've read Shannara, but have you read his Running with the Demon trilogy? And they're probably going to say no. So it's The Night and the Void, I think it's called, the trilogy. But it's a really, really good series. So Running with the Demon is the first one. A Night of the Word is the second book, and Angel Fire East, book 3 of the Word and the Void trilogy. Now they're not chunky books. They're like 500 pages each, if that. Atmospheric, creepy, disturbing, exciting, thrilling, weird. If you can find them in your local library or online somewhere or eBay or buy them brand new, definitely get hold of a copy. I've barely scratched the surface of urban fantasy. There are so many other books and series that I could have talked about, but hopefully I've introduced a couple that you're not familiar with and that you might want to check out some of the less well-known ones, like the Terry Brooks trilogy, which I'm going to have to go back and do a reread. Now that I've been talking about it, I'm really keen to go back and just kind of sunk myself back into that world, because it is so different to other urban fantasy. And there are lots of ones that are very kind of Me Too and samey, but the Kate Griffin ones and the Terry Brooks ones are not like anything else. They have quite a unique feel. So I'm looking forward to going back and reading some of those series. I will be doing some more of these videos in the future, looking at other subgenres, but there's more of the other kind of videos coming up. I've got some interviews coming up, and there's more stuff to do with self-publishing. As I continue to explore that, I'll be doing videos where I'm just working things through on the camera, but also talking to people who have done it, who will be giving me advice, hopefully, things to do and things to avoid. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. I'll be back very soon with another video.